Hi there, thank you for joining us for Hobbies, Crafts, and Collectibles here on WEIU. I'm your host, Duska Cornwell. I'm excited today to talk to Dan Hagen. He is a comic book aficionado. You're going to want to see that interview. Plus, we'll have Karenlee Spencer of Charleston with us today. She is an artist on many levels, but I'm especially excited that we get to see what she does with Gourd, so stay tuned. I'm so excited to introduce to you Dan Hagen. He knows everything there is to know, I think, about comic books, having talked with you a little bit. Dan, thank you for coming to the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'll never shut up about them.
All right. Well, tell us. Start right now. Start talking.
Right.
When did you first fall in love with comic books?
When I was 3 or whatever. I think I learned to read because of comic books. I would have my parents and my grandparents would read them to me, and I really wanted to read them myself, and that encouraged me to read kind of before I went to school. I always say, I think the first word I could read was meteorite, because they were always falling to Earth in Superman comics.
Not many kids can probably say that was their first word. So what type of comics did you read back then?
Superman, Batman, that it was a little bit before Marvel Comics appeared, but I always loved superheroes because they're so colorful and dashing and all of that. And I remember when I was about 9, my aunt brought me a Superman comic for my birthday and also an Archie comic, and she said, "This represents the comics you're leaving behind and the comics you'll be graduating to," and I said, Sorry. So, Archie's fine, but he doesn't have a cape, he can't fly.
I kind of liked Archie. But how long have comic books been around? Do you know when the first comic books?
The first comic books appeared in the mid-1930s. The superhero was sort of created in a way in comic books in 1938 with the first appearance of Superman in Action Comics #1. All the superheroes are descended from that, the people who have powers and secret identities and colorful costumes and all that strange stuff that the rest of the world looks at us and says, "What?"
So is it pretty much an American phenomenon at first?
It is in many ways, but it's spread throughout the world. The Japanese have a lot of superheroes, but they tend to be in teams and have giant robots. It's just a thing they do. The French have super beings, but they tend to be super criminals. They tend to steal lots of stuff and so forth. And the British have superheroes too. So yeah, but we're sort of the primary source, America, for superheroes.
I see.
It's that American can-do attitude, I think.
That's what I was going to say. What do you think it is about superheroes that appeals?
It is. When Superman first started in 1938, he was really a New Deal populist. I mean, he would break into places and grab wife beaters and throw them against the wall, and he would take a mine owner of an unsafe mine and hurl him down the mine and say, "See how you like it." So it was very serious stuff. It was created by 2 teenage boys, young teenage boys, who sold it very cheap to DC, and so then it evolved into the more Boy Scoutish character we know today. But at first, he was a pretty quite a social crusader.
I was going to say, it sounds like it might have been some kind of commentary on social justice.
It was the middle of the Depression. I always say the planetary explosion that gave us Superman wasn't really the Krypton, it was the Great Depression. When the world blew up, people needed to feel empowered. They were individuals felt small and helpless, and Superman, other characters like the Shadow and Doc Savage and so forth, were characters who said individual people that gave this fantasy of being able to conquer evil by themselves, and so people needed to hear that. In the same way, like the Fred Astaire movies and the Ginger Roger movies, where everybody was rich and they could dance and all of that. It was the opposite of what was really going on.
Shirley Temple.
Shirley Temple, right, the perfect little girl.
Sure.
Yeah, never starving,
Yeah. So when did comic books start translating into the cinema? I know that became pretty popular.
Very early on, actually. At first, there were movie serials, and so they were already movie serials. They were 15 minutes long. They ended with a cliffhanger, like the old Batman TV show, which was based on that, or the Indiana Jones movies were based on movie serials. And so those were from the late 30s and 1940s right on through. And then there was the Superman TV show in the early 1950s, and a radio show immediately, and Superman was instantly translated into movie cartoons, an excellent series of movie cartoons in the early 40s. And then the Batman TV show in the 60s, and then the Superman movies in the 70s, and then the Batman movies, and the next set of Batman movies, and the next set of Batman movies. I have a friend, Jim Salicrup, who always says, Batman is a very malleable character. Batman has both been in The Dark Knight in this very grim, story, and he's also personally met Scooby-Doo. So just connect those things if you can.
Sure. So what do you think of the movie versions of these comic books that you know so well?
I think they're really good. We're going through the great era of superhero movies now. I think there's I was talking to somebody just earlier about the connection between comic books and movies, and they're a lot alike. The storyboards they do for movies are similar to comic books in a way, and the movies are pitching themselves at that 12-year-old boy audience essentially anyway, and so there it is. But I think there's a strange phenomenon that goes on. This started as simple stories for children, and now they're major motion pictures for everybody, and they've gotten more serious and deeper, as deep as you can take characters who are that inherently ludicrous. You know what I mean? The new Batman movies are quite grim, and they are a commentary on moral dilemmas. Because superhero comics are always about morality. Stan Lee said, the famous phrase that he came up with in the first appearance of Spider-Man was, with great power comes great responsibility. Something we continually rediscover.
Now, you mentioned Stan Lee.
Yeah.
I hear you've talked to Stan Lee on more than one occasion.
About 4 or 5 interviews I did with him, mostly over the phone. I met him once but didn't talk to him then, but for my friend Dave Kraft's Magazine Comics interview. So Stan's great. If Stan were talking to you, he would say, "It's a funny thing, Duska. When I created Spider-Man," and then he would tell you how he created Spider-Man. He's very personable, and he always uses your name. He's very nice to talk to. He's very, he's a sweet guy, and it's hard to underestimate his contribution to the industry. Comics were sort of dying when he created the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, and revives the superhero comics by making them more relevant to the reality of the day.
I see.
Because Peter Parker he got superpowers, but he didn't become a stalwart hero. He was still a loser. He still couldn't date the girl, he still had pimples, etc. and so that was more realistic.
Sure. Now, when you were doing interviews for your friend's magazine, who else were you able to interview?
Robert Culp, Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers. That was fun because to talk about, he had views about superhero fantasy and children that were really interesting. And who else? Robert Picardo, who was on Star Trek, and some of the screenwriters, others that are escaping me right now, but a number of people. I did 20 or 30 interviews for them, mostly kind of Hollywood-based interviews.
Sure. Now, you have some books here that are compilations. What are some of your favorite characters that you've...
Well, all of these are, but this is Iron Man. I thought I'd bring him because he's so popular now. These are the first appearances of Iron Man, and they're compiled, created by
What year would that have been when he
1964.
came out? 1964.
Iron Man was... Stan Lee said he was the favorite superhero character of girls at that time because he was a handsome playboy billionaire industrialist, and something about that appeals to girls. So,
I see. So comic books, they're not just a guy thing.
Girls have always liked superheroes, I think, but it's a little like, there was always a question about how much girls like superheroes, but there was, I think Buffy the Vampire Slayer showed you can have female superheroes if they're equally concerned with going to the prom as fighting evil. There's like, I've got to kill those vampires, but who's going to take me to the prom?
There's time for romance.
There is,
right?
there always is. There must be. There must be.
Okay, what about this one? Now, this one I think is kind of fun because it talks about Jimmy Olsen here on the front, and you said that being around Superman all the time can be a little bit
Yes, it's hazardous to be around Superman. Jimmy had, at one point, Superman gave him a signal watch because he got in so much trouble, and so it would go Z, 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 and send out a supersonic signal so Superman could come. Because you see, Jimmy tends to turn into a giant turtle person and a wolf man and an alien from outer space and an elastic lad, etc. Because Superman brings back these serums and things from space, and Jimmy, just not the brightest pencil in the box, knocks him back, and then has to go through all this stuff. So Jimmy had his own comic for a long time, hence all the transformations. I just always thought it was funny that he and Lois, these allegedly normal characters, went through all these incredibly bizarre situations, but then they got up the next day and went and, did another news story for the Daily Planet. So
I see. Yeah. Now, you mentioned Lois Lane, okay, one of my favorite characters.
I always did too. Margot Kidder. I interviewed Margot Kidder. That was one of my favorite interviews.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
That's cool.
That's why. I remember at one point she said, I'm not Lois Lane, Dan. She said, yeah, okay, I know.
That must be hard for her. I never thought about that going through life as Lois Lane.
Right.
Now, but what happened in the comics in the end? Are they still making the Superman story?
Oh yeah, in fact, they've just rebooted it in a way. They've just sort of they've returned him, in a sense, to his 1938 roots, where he's a lower-powered social crusader now, just as he was in 1938. Recently, within the last 10 or 15 years, he and Lois got married, But they've
That's what I
undone
was
all
gonna
that stuff. Yeah,
ask.
that's right. They finally did, and so it only took courtship of only 60 years. So girls, you know, wait around.
There's hope.
That's right.
Your prince in a leotard could come.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, now the last book that you have over here is a compilation of Batman.
Batman: The Dark Knight by Frank Miller, and this was a great sort of artistic triumph, if I may say, of the 1980s when Frank Miller created this dark view of Batman, which is what you see reflected in the Christian Bale movies. You know, in fact, some of the scenes are right in there. The Dark Knight Returns was a story about an aged Batman who's embittered, who comes back to fight crime that is nearly overwhelming in Gotham City, and then all the TV pundits sit around and say, "Is Batman good? Is he bad? Is he vigilante?" Just as they would today. You know, I mean, there's no clear consensus on Batman, and so it was a good story. So he sort of elevated the tone of the superhero to make it a little more realistic.
I see.
As also did The Watchmen, done at the same time. So.
Now, I know a lot of the movies today are dealing with the backstory. How did that superhero become who he is?
Right.
Was that done in the original comics?
Oh yes, they always had an origin. And, you know, we loved origins. I mean, as kids growing up, I remember DC, because often you didn't know them. Back then, they'd been going for 200 issues and you didn't know what the origin of the character was. I remember DC at about 1960 did a 25-cent comic, which was big, called Secret Origins, with all the origins of the characters, and it sold out the first day. I cried like a baby when I didn't get that thing, I'll tell you. I mean, so everybody wanted that.
How many comic books do you have in your collection, you think?
Oh, Lord, I don't know.
You lose count?
Yeah, I have a lot. I have a spinner rack that my friend Dave Kraft, who has the magazine, gave me from an old drugstore, and so I put it, what can you do with them? So I put my favorites up there on the spinner rack, and I just gloat.
I see. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I have learned so much.
Well, thank you.
Dan, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
in
I
and
enjoyed
informing us about comic books. It is an honor for me to introduce to you Karenlee Spencer of Charleston. Karenlee, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Duska. It's great to be here.
I'm excited, surrounded by all these lovely, lovely works of art. Now, Karenlee, she's an artist on many levels, but what you're famous for, I've heard you called the Gourd Lady. You do obviously lovely work with gourds, from growing them to turning them into beautiful works of art. When did you get into this?
Oh, about 28 years ago, actually, by accident. But I met a great guy, and he had a little string of gourds drying in his cabin, and I said, "What are those?" Because I'd never really seen gourds before. And he said, "Well, they're gourds." And I said, "Well, let's paint them," literally, and that's how we started. So just started painting them and selling them locally.
Did you have any training in painting before that, or?
Well, yes, I have my degree in art from Eastern Illinois University, and I knew from a very young age, probably from the time I was about 5, that I wanted to be an artist when I grew up. And so I just continued to have that dream, and serendipitously it happened for me.
Wonderful. Well, you do a beautiful job. You're one of those people who can see something like this gourd right here, this is in a dried state, right?
It's dried, yeah.
So you'd see this and you say, "Oh, that's not a gourd, that is a Santa or an angel," or
Right.
That is awesome.
That is what I saw actually when I first saw the gourds. I saw Santa.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
So take me through the process. This is in its dried form. What do you do?
Okay, so this is dry, and one of the ways we know it's dry is because you can shake it, and you can hear the seeds, and it's like a rattle.
Sure.
In fact, rattles and maracas are made from gourds, but it's very dirty. There's still dirt from the field, and there's a coating on this. It's actually the skin, but all of the moisture from the inside of the gourd has evaporated through the skin, and so now you have to get all of this off of here so you get this beautiful smooth surface that you can work with. So I liken it to a dirty casserole dish. And so scrubbing a dirty casserole dish.
Fun.
You take a copper chore girl, and I like the copper chore girls as opposed to stainless or plastic. And you immerse this in water for, a nice warm water's the best. For an hour will do it, but you could even go less than an hour. Gourds float, so it's quite a challenge to get them to stay down. Lots of little tricks to getting them to stay down.
Right.
But we used a big horse trough and put a bunch of them in at one time, and then put a big screen door over it, and then concrete bricks on top of that, and then start dumping the water in. Anyway, you just scrub, and then rinse it in a weak bleach solution and let them dry on a pallet outside. And once they're dry, you have a beautiful, smooth, hard surface on which to paint.
Awesome.
Yep.
Now your work has taken you all over, I know, the nation. How far and wide have you heard from people that have your gourds in their home?
All over the world.
All over the world.
Oh, yes. People have called me, galleries have called me. I've just, been connected in all kinds of ways to people who want to order a gourd. I've shipped everywhere. My favorite is I shipped an entire family of gourds to Nantucket a few years ago for a Thanksgiving celebration, and I think I made 13 gourds, everybody down to the newborn baby and the dogs. So
there was one for each person in the family.
And it was at their table. It was their little, place card were this gourd family. It was really cool to do it, and they loved it. Loved them.
Oh, that is neat. Now, I always think of fall when I see gourds, and you have made, I'm sure, a wide variety of characters, but I love her. Here's your witch. This is great for a fall-themed gourd. Tell me about her.
Well, she's really simple. Most of the things that I've done in the past have been very detailed and intricate, and I've broken away from that. I think after 28 years, I just really felt like I needed a break from so much detail. So I like this gunmetal kind of color and this very metallic surface, and I think it's very sculptural, and it just shows off the gourd. In fact, on the way in here, someone said, "Is that a piñata?" Yeah, but this is really neat too because it's vintage crepe paper. Very old crepe paper, and I wanted to really use that in a special way. So I thought it shows it off.
I love the face. I mean, your faces
you.
are so expressive.
I think over these years, what I've really become known for more than any other thing are the faces. People say that they have a soulful quality to them, and that they speak to them, and that is something that I guess I don't consciously try and impart, but I do try and put some spirit and soul and character into each one.
And sometimes the gourd makes up the whole body. Here you have an example of a scarecrow, and the part that's the gourd is his face.
Yes, and I made him this year for a postcard for a special event that a friend of mine was doing, and his body is all cloth and stuffed, and so he's kind of limber and jointed, and he can move and bend and do whatever. But yes, his face is a gourd. He's very simple and he's just very sweet. But I like using homespun fabrics that are made in America. In fact, I work with a mill in Kentucky that have been weaving for generations, and I use their fabrics. But yeah, he's just kind of winsome and sweet. Yep.
Now, pick up Santa over here and hand him to me. He is wonderful.
Yeah, he's a little unusual shape. I really like working with all of the different shapes that are possible in the gourd field. And he's kind of tall and kind of bowling pinny, but he's a one of a kind. So if a gallery would be so open as to just say, hey, do a collection for me and nothing specific, I have a lot more freedom to do things like this.
Oh, he's adorable.
And again, he's rather simple. He's newer. And I used to put, oh my goodness, just about anything that you would ever expect Santa to hold, from a toy horse and drums and toy soldiers and dolls, and he would be holding all those things. But as I say, over the years, I've lightened up my workload on gourds, and I rather like the simplicity.
Oh, it's beautiful. And you're not limited to home decor. This is an adorable necklace. I didn't even know gourds grew this small.
They do. That's just a little baby there. That's about as little as I get, and those actually are as difficult, if not more difficult, to do than the bigger pieces, because I work with a barrel Prismacolor pencil. I buy them by the gross, and just black, and that's how I draw all the faces and the details in there. And yeah, he's a challenge to make him come out right and have that soulfulness that people like in the eyes, but that's real popular.
I love how he's gift boxed too.
Oh yeah, he's got to come in a little. You have to store him from year to year.
Presentation is important. Now, I don't want to run out of time. I want to talk about this stack of magazines right here. This is an example of how many publications you have been in through the years. Many, many, many. There's well over a dozen here. This one really struck my eye because you're on the cover. Explain this magazine to us.
Well, and that is actually a catalog. It's called Female Creations, and I met the owners of this company at the New York Gift Show some years ago, and they loved my work, and they started selling it and offering it through the catalog, and they called me and asked if I would be interested in a cover. Well, jeepers, that didn't take me much to say yes, and I was really thrilled with what they came up with. I think it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
And this is actually was one of Oprah's favorite companies at the time. So they asked me to send her a gourd. So she actually has one of these little
one of your
angel
gourds.
gourds. Well, sure.
Wow.
Yeah,
And I'm just going to name.
Has it, but
we don't have time to go through all, but I want to name. She's been highlighted in U.S. News and World Report, The Clarion, Country Living, one of my favorites. The Craft Report, many, many, many publications. Now this is special. This is a book entitled Made in Illinois, an Artisan's Gallery. And the layout for your gourds is so nice.
well, both the photographer and the writer for this book were wonderful to work with. They were meticulous and in fact came back and talked to us again and shot more photos again. They weren't happy with the first batch. So this is a very beautiful book. It was
is stunning.
Really because of the First Lady at the time of Illinois, Laura Lynn Ryan, was, I call her the First Lady of Arts in Illinois because she really elevated art and artists to a higher level with all of the things she did, but certainly this book. And it has a lasting value. It's, you know, the classic coffee table art book. But it was distributed throughout the state at various tourist sites and museums, and I think to have a copy of that is something great for generations to come. I've given them to several people that I know would love them, but it was just a beautiful book and a great honor. Great honor to be involved.
That's wonderful, and you're so deserving of
Thank
that
you.
honor. Now, before we close, you also do mixed media art. Is that right?
I do.
And I don't have any out here on the table, but you have something special
I have
hiding.
a surprise for you, Duska.
Oh, please bring it out. I can't wait.
We talked a little bit about me coming here, and I was bragging about, oh yes, altered art and mixed media, this and that, and I had
and that's
nothing.
making things with found objects,
It
right?
is, yeah.
Okay.
The art of the found object.
Yes.
And so I did this. I went into my studio for children in my back porch, and I keep it stocked with all kinds of stuff. And I looked around and I found a few things that I thought I could make something out of. And so I made this for you. And she is kind of an angel, I guess. I call her favorite pair because she can actually hold your favorite pair of earrings. But she's made from, you know what, you tell me what she's made from.
Oh my goodness, I know what this is. This is a leg to a clawfoot tub.
And
it's a clawfoot.
that clawfoot tub leg is from my 1866 Gothic Revival house. I have 2 tubs and I saved one and all the stuff. So I saved this for 8 years and knew that I'd do something. And then this horseshoe I dug up out of the backyard. So my house was a farm. Originally, and so I'm sure that this was just one of the horse's shoes. It's old. This baby's old.
You are a creative genius.
Well, thank
no
you.
doubt.
And
you
the
so
glitter is
much.
just a gift from my studio. I didn't do that intentionally, but there's glitter all over.
Chart.
There's glitter all over. And then this is actually it's a weight to hold a tablecloth. And then these are just Christmas ornament hangers. And those little button eyes, my cat tore off of a pillow. It was all edged with these buttons. And I could not bear to throw them out. So there you have it.
Thank you so much,
Yes.
Karenlee, and thank you for coming and
Thank
showing
you.
us your beautiful
Thank
work.
you for having me.
Thank you for watching Hobbies, Crafts, and Collectibles here on WEIU. If you know someone we should interview, please contact us at weiu.net. See you next time.